Hi everyone, my name is Susie Burke. I'm a psychologist at the Australian Psychological Society working on climate change and natural disasters. Thanks very much for inviting me to speak at the 2014 Climate Action Summit. I'd love to be there with you. It looks like you've got a terrific program of speakers and workshops. Instead of flying interstate this time, though, I've gone for the low carbon option of pre-recording a short talk on insights from psychology that can help people to effectively engage with and take action on climate change. Notwithstanding the size of the problem, the scale of the change needed, the current political context, and the barriers caused by our own human psychology, there are nonetheless many opportunities for building momentum and making the transition to a low carbon world. I'm going to talk about some of those lessons from psychology today. Much of what I'm going to talk about is going to be elaborated on by some of your other speakers during the conference, particularly some of those people from Psychology for a Safe Climate. But I also noticed in the program Clancy Morrison talking about workshop on how to talk with climate change deniers, and also somebody called Don MacArthur, and they looked like they were, sort of very similar to some of the things that I'm going to talk about today as well. But first, a bit about psychology. People often ask me, why are psychologists working on climate change? And I say, well, there's three big reasons. First, climate change is largely caused by human behaviour. Second, it has an enormous impact on human health and well-being. And third, most of the solutions that we need to solve climate change require profound changes in human behaviour. And as specialists in human behaviour, this is dead centre in our area of interest and expertise. And indeed, psychologists and other social scientists and behavioural scientists have been working on climate change and related areas for over 50 years. You see, climate change is as much a psychological and social problem as it is an ecological and environmental catastrophe. Every impact of climate change, whether it be an extreme weather event devastating a human settlement or change disease vectors spreading illnesses in different areas, has an impact on human health and well-being. And dealing effectively with climate change also requires a great understanding of human psychology. We need to know how people think about climate change. We need to know how people are understanding and coming to terms with it and psychologically adapting to a climate changed reality and world. These things are very important, critically important part of climate action. People need to be able to understand their thoughts and feelings about climate change, manage these thoughts and feelings so that they can face up to the scale of the problem without trying to avoid it or minimise the problem. And they then need to be able to make profound changes to how they're living and how they're behaving in order to reduce the threat of climate change and adapt to the threats that cannot be avoidable. So what do we learn from psychology to help us get on with responding to climate change? I've chosen a few slides to illustrate my main points. First, this is a picture of some of the inspiring psychologists who've been working in this space. What follows is a combination of the key strategies that I've gleaned from each of these social scientists and others and their extensive research in these areas. One of them is George Marshall, climate change communicator from the UK, who's recently published a book called Why Our Brains Are Wired to Deny Climate Change. Nikki Hare, social psychologist from New Zealand, who's written a book called Psychology for a Better World. Martin Seligman, American psychologist, expert in positive psychology. And also Doug Mackenzie Moore, a Canadian environmental psychologist, well known for his work on community-based social marketing in the field of sustainability. Look them up. They write great stuff, and there are many others like them. So getting on with sustainability, let's start with the facts. Climate change is a scientific fact. Scientists are remarkably sure that climate change is bringing major impacts. And our psychological obstacles are also a scientific fact. The large body of rigorous research-based evidence suggests that climate change struggles to overcome numerous cognitive biases in our thinking. For example, we know that people are biased to pay more attention to threats that are near to them, near in time and in place, than threats that are distant to them. We know that people have a finite pool of worry. If you're worried about your health or your family members or job security or things like that, then there's less capacity to worry about things like climate change. We know that people are tempted to avoid things that are distressing for them. We know that people are driven by habits of behaviour, habits to jump in the car and run down to the shops to pick up some errands. We know that people make mental shortcuts, use mental shortcuts to make sense of information. We know that they often rely on the opinions of others who are like them or who they admire when they're making their decisions about things. So this next slide lists some of the key strategies from psychology for helping people to engage in effective action. I won't talk about all of these today. I'm just going to talk about some of my favourites. So my first favourite, make climate here, now, and for sure. This deals with our cognitive bias to pay more attention to things that are here and in front of us, and to discount threats that are far from us in time and place. And it also deals with our tendency to let perceived uncertainty be a sufficient reason to act in self-interest over acting for the environment. So for sure, use the consensus. John Cook and his colleagues' important research into the scientific consensus on climate change tells us clearly that telling people that 97% of scientists accept the science on climate change is very important in terms of increasing public awareness of human-caused climate change and support for climate solutions. And make climate change here and now by finding moments of proximity that can demand attention. Extreme weather events, for example, can be used to make climate change here and now. George Marshall and his colleagues have researched this. They caution that it's not entirely straightforward. Extreme weather events also give rise to increased anxiety in affected communities and also increased in-group loyalty. So in a way, the affected community often closes ranks to others. Both these factors can readily exclude consideration of climate change. And even when confronted with direct evidence of climate extremes, the main influence on people's attitudes will still be the views of people that they know and trust. So the best option for linking extreme weather events with climate change lies with providing the information for trusted local communicators to open up a conversation within their own community about long-term preparedness, preparing for the threat of more frequent and extreme weather events. Preparedness and adaptation are routes for people to accept that climate change is real and already underway. It's possible to build a discussion around these topics even when it's politically taboo to talk about the wider issues. So my second favourite point is to remember that people are social. Now there's 3 points that I want to make here. First, people are natural imitators. Second, people like to be connected to each other and to feel a sense of belonging. And third, people listen to and trust people that they feel are like them. I've sort of covered this last one in the previous point. So let's think about people as natural imitators first. The major influence on our attitudes and behaviour are our contacts with other people, not the media, not information campaigns, other people. We're acutely sensitive to how other people behave and think, and we naturally imitate this. Often, this information comes from social norms, which are rules, explicit or implicit, that groups in society use to work out what are appropriate and inappropriate values, beliefs, attitudes and behaviours. They're rules about what is normal in society, and people are highly motivated to be normal. Numerous studies have examined the power of social norms. We know, for example, that descriptive norm messages that say everyone's doing it to promote conservation-minded actions are the most effective. So, for example, millions of people around the world are joining in the climate rally on the 21st of September, or 4 million households in Australia have put solar panels on their roofs. These sorts of messages that say everybody's doing it, it's normal to be green, are very effective in inspiring people to behave in environmentally sustainable ways. Another very effective way of using the power of norms is modelling. To model the behaviour that you would like other people to take up. People are much more likely to change their behaviour if they see others doing it. We need, therefore, to make visible the behaviours that we want other people to do. We need to leave behavioural traces of what we're doing for the environment. So businesses, for example, that have cycle racks just outside their building are leaving a very clear message to everybody that passes by that this business has people who ride to work. Attaching your helmet to your backpack or your bag when you leave your bike rather than parking it with your bike, and walking through town or walking through your day with your helmet hanging off your bag is another behavioural trace that shows that you're somebody who rides their bike rather than drives their car, and you're modelling and leaving behavioural traces of pro-environmental behaviour, and you're establishing this as a normal behaviour, a normal thing to do. We also need to tell stories about people doing sustainable behaviours. Books, films, blogs, stories in local newspapers, newsletters, sharing anecdotes with each other. We build a story. And look, just a final note on social norms. People underestimate the power of social norms, and there's a lot of research evidence to back this up. when it comes to estimating the reasons for why we behave, people usually don't ever think that it's because we model and shape our behavior on other people. So it's very important that we use this to our advantage, even though it doesn't naturally come to us that this is such a powerful influence. The second point is, let's look at the power of connection and of wanting to belong. People are best motivated when an action reinforces their identity and sense of belonging to their social group. And we can work with this power of identity when attempting to inspire sustainability in others. Identities are social. We can't be something without getting together with others, or at least following in the footsteps of others who've gone before us. So we need to get feedback that we belong to the group, and we can help people to feel that they belong to a group of similar others who care about climate change and take action to reduce carbon emissions. Now, another point about identities is they involve action. We only make an identity real if we take action. I'm not a climate activist unless I'm writing letters to politicians, planting trees, divesting from Westpac, actually doing something that takes action on climate change. And importantly, identities also need to make us feel good about ourselves. We need to believe that others value that identity. We need to feel proud to belong to that group. A group needs to boost our position in society. So putting it together, we can emphasize that action on climate change makes us proud to be who we are and to be a part of a group of people like ourselves who are concerned and taking action. And so we create communities of shared conviction. And there are other important benefits as well of creating these group identities. Being affiliated with a group can activate social goals like caring for others, maximizing the good of the group, sharing resources, cooperation. These are essential values if we're to be able to fully solve climate change. Secondly, participating in a group can also lead to a greater sense of accomplishment, as more can be achieved when we work together as a group than if we take action on our own. And third, being a part of a group can be an incredibly important source of support when an individual is feeling overwhelmed or despondent or helpless or hopeless. So, build identities. And my final favourite, relate solutions to sources of happiness and well-being. So people are happiness seekers. It's evolutionary. We're more likely to continue to do something when we feel a sense of well-being when we're doing it. And we also do things better when we're happy. There's plenty of research backing this up. Nikki Hara, in her book that I mentioned before, covers a lot of this research. Look it up if you're interested. Creativity, cooperation, openness to change, all are influenced and enhanced by happiness. People who feel good are more willing to look at threats, which is particularly important when we're getting people to face up to climate change. And people in a good mood are better at negotiating. They're more efficient, more effective, more creative, and they're better at finding novel solutions. So there are many benefits that come from people doing something and having a sense of well-being or happiness. So, if we want to develop creative strategies for sustainability, research evidence suggests that we should attempt to induce positive emotions. We need to relate solutions to climate change to the sources of happiness. And this often comes out of the connection that we feel with friends, neighbours, colleagues. We need to create opportunities for people to engage with climate solutions using their passion and their talents. People are happy when solving problems in a domain that they love. And in the long run, a boring system cannot last. So there you have it, a whistle-stop tour of some of the ways in which psychology can provide opportunities and solutions for climate change. Let's finish with George Marshall's advice that we should frame climate change as an informed choice between desirable and catastrophic outcomes, so that we can understand that inaction in itself is a choice. And I'm glad that you're all choosing action. Thanks very much for having me. Goodbye.